can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blur Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, we are here to talk about Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants #1 by Al Ewing and Paco Medina. There are a couple of things you really want to know going into this first issue of Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants. It is a direct follow-up to Sins of Sinister #1, where Sins of Sinister ended at the 10-year timeline. For those that are not keeping up, Sins of Sinister is going to take place over the course of different points in the Marvel Comics timeline, whereas Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants, as well as Nightcrawlers and Immortal X-Men #1 issues, are going to take place in the 10-year mark. The second issues of each of these titles will take place during the year 100, and the third and final issues of each of these series will also take place in year 1000, with Sins of Sinister Dominion being the finale. So in this first issue of Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants, it has been 10 years since the beginning of Sins of Sinister #1, meaning that everything that we saw in Sins of Sinister, all of the turmoil and chaos, all of that stuff has already happened, and we're picking up right from there. Arakko has already been decimated to the point that the planet formerly known as Mars has been turned into an asteroid belt. And we knew from Sins of Sinister #1 that Storm was out in the wind. She was considered public enemy #1, and that Sinister, as well as the rest of the Sinister variants on the Quiet Council, they wanted Storm dead or alive. And some would wonder, where would Storm and the Brotherhood be hiding out? Truth is, they've been hiding in plain sight, hiding among the wreckage of their former planet. The major plot point of this issue is that Destiny, or rather Mystique, in the form of Destiny, is trying to convince Storm that they have one last shot to reset the timeline and fix everything that was taken from them. For those who may or may not remember, we learned over the course of the Immortal X-Men series that Mr. Sinister had a secret base, a secret lab, full of his clones of Moira McTaggart that he was using as Quotey Fingers save states, so that if he encountered something that he didn't like, or his controlled experiment of trying to dominate the universe through his genetic manipulations, if anything went awry, he could kill a Moira clone and go back to whatever timeline he chooses. By the time of Immortal X-Men #1, we know at the very least he has reset the timeline 25 times prior to that moment, with the Sinister that we are introduced to in that issue referring to himself as number 26. Destiny wants Storm and the Brotherhood alongside Mystique to infiltrate the Muir Island laboratory, or rather the Sinister laboratory hidden underneath it, and destroy the Moira clones so that they can go back and hopefully reset everything. Now, to do this, Storm and her Brotherhood, who most of which are characters we are already familiar with, characters like Cable and WizKid, and also Cora of the Burning Heart, a character who was more recently introduced during Al Ewing's Sword series, who is, for all intents and purposes, a booster. She's a mutant whose power is to boost the abilities of other mutants around her. Very similar to characters like Fabian Cortez, only in the case of Cora of the Burning Heart, there are no negative side effects to her using her power to boost other mutants' X-gene capabilities like there is with Fabian Cortez. We are also introduced to two new mutants, or in one case, a reintroduction. One of those characters being John Ironfire, whose X-gene has transmogrified his blood into molten metal and fire. In a roundabout way, he's very similar to the character of Marrow. For those unfamiliar, the character of Marrow, her mutant power was that her bones were always constantly growing to the point that she could pull them out in the form of blades and daggers. John Ironfire can do something incredibly similar. He's able to manifest his blood into molten weapons like blades and daggers and knives, even firing them out of his body like ways we've seen characters Quill do, only in this case, instead of firing actual quills, he's firing his blood in the form of daggers and throwing knives. To my knowledge, this is John Ironfire's first appearance. He may or may not have appeared in the X-Men Red series as a background character at the very least, but as far as I know, this is his first appearance in Marvel Comics. What we do know about him is that whoever he is incredibly loyal to Storm. He will defend her honor to no end, and he also seems to command the same level of respect from Storm herself. The next new character that we're introduced to, or rather in this case, we're reintroduced to, is a character by the name of Lulo Marshall. We were actually introduced to her not very long ago in X-Men Red Volume 2, Number 6. She was the little girl who we saw interacting with the astronaut Dr. Craig Marshall, whose surname she apparently took on for herself. And at the time we met her, she had yet to have displayed any powers whatsoever, but by now, 10 years later, she seems to have finally activated her X gene, granting her superhuman speed. She's mentioned to be the fastest being still living, implying that while she's superhumanly fast, she may not quite be the fastest person that ever lived. And the little blurbs that we see introducing us to a lot of the characters in this comic, it is seemingly implied that Dr. Craig Marshall died during the destruction of Arakko, or at some point has died since the opening events of Sins of Sinister, hence why they throw the line out there that her lighthearted exterior hides a past filled with loss, because if you don't remember, she also had a brother as well, and it's heavily implied that she lost both Dr. Craig Marshall as well as her brother. Now, getting back to Destiny's plan to sneak into Sinister's hidden lab under Muir Island and destroy one of the Moira clones, the issue with that is that if you've read Sins of Sinister number 1, you already know there's nothing in the lab. This issue takes place roughly around the same time or directly after the events of the final pages of Sins of Sinister number 1, where at the end of that issue, Sinister learned that when he went to go reset the timeline because things weren't going quite the way that he wanted, he discovered he had no Moira clones. The base had been raided. I originally posited that it was very likely Storm, Destiny, and Mystique who broke into the lab because Destiny knew about it, so why wouldn't she use that information? She knew about it and told Storm and Mystique, and the three of them together, maybe with the help of some other like-minded mutants, would go in, steal the equipment, and ruin Sinister's entire plan. And that is, honestly, roughly what actually happened, only with a little bit of a twist. Technically, Storm, Destiny, and Mystique did steal the clone laboratory. They faced off with an army of Sinister's chimeras who derive their genetics from characters like Marrow and Maggot combined, and we even see one that seemingly has the genetics of Glob, though we don't really know exactly how all that works out in the end. And once they've dealt with that issue and have an opportunity to take Sinister's clone lab, it's revealed that Mystique is a traitor. I know, total surprise. Mystique betrays Storm in this issue and mortally wounds her, and then teleports the clone lab to a mysterious benefactor who isn't as mysterious as they want you to believe at first. Destiny set this up from the word go. Destiny never had any intention of allowing Storm to kill one of the Moira clones and resetting the timeline. What Destiny wanted was to throw in her lot with the mysterious benefactor, as it's quickly shown to us that the clone lab has been teleported to the World Farm, a place that only one person tends to hang out in, and that is Orbis Stellaris, who was revealed in X-Men Red Volume 2, number 10, to be the Ace Sinister clone. Now, the real question is, why would Destiny throw in her lot with one of the Sinisters and seemingly go against her pro-mutant stance? It would seem kind of odd, especially for Orbis Stellaris, who, while he doesn't seem to share the same anti-mutant sentiment exactly that some of his other Sinister clones might, case in point, Dr. Stasis, we know mostly for a fact that he is not a mutant. So this isn't a pro-mutant move here. This is very much a pro-Destiny and Mystique move. If you haven't been keeping up with Immortal X-Men, I will definitely point to Immortal X-Men number 3, where it was revealed that Destiny had seen all conceivable timelines, and in every conceivable timeline where Krakoa is saved, Mystique dies. There is no future with a positive outcome for Krakoa where Mystique lives, and it's for a number of reasons. It could be because Mystique sacrificed herself for the greater good, or just got caught up in some way. Regardless of the reasons why, she always dies, and Destiny knows this. And right now, this is the only potential future with her working alongside Orbis Stellaris where Mystique is still alive. This is why Destiny is doing this, because ultimately, while she does want Krakoa to thrive, she also wants to keep her wife. She doesn't want to lose Mystique, so it's heartbreak, or rather potential heartbreak, that is driving Destiny's decision to throw in her lot with Orbis Stellaris. And this issue actually proves a theory that I had posited in a previous video where I talked about whether or not any of the Sinisters are actively working together or working against each other, or if they are working towards the same goal, albeit just doing it under terms of separation. The latter is honestly the case. Orbis Stellaris seems to have the exact same goal that Mr. Sinister had. Take over the entire world, make all the world sinister, but he wanted to do it himself. He didn't want to work alongside the Diamond Sinister, as it were. He believes that he alone should have that power. He even points out that only one can have dominion, and it will be him. Basically meaning that Dr. Stasis, Mother Righteous, and Sinister proper, none of them are worth his time to work with, and that only he should be the one to control everything. And while we do know from the solicits that there will be the miniseries, The Sinister Four, we know eventually he's gonna have to work with the other three. But as it stands right now, Orbis Stellaris makes it pretty clear that the Sinisters are not working together, at least not all of them. And at least in the case of Orbis Stellaris, he doesn't really care what happens to the Diamond Sinister, basically letting you know there's no real true allegiances there. And we kind of knew this too about Dr. Stasis, because Dr. Stasis in X-Men number 12, he mentioned that, yeah, he doesn't give a damn about the other Nathaniel Essex. He believes that that one is a clone and not the original, and that he himself is the original. And all of them, I'm gonna go on a limb and say, maybe with the exception of Mother Righteous, see themselves as the original Nathaniel Essex. Right now, Mother Righteous is the only one who hasn't made any kind of a claim towards being a version of Nathaniel Essex, whether it's a clone or otherwise. We don't really know what Storm's fate is going to be, and while I do think it's very possible for her to die in this series, and whether it happens later by someone actually killing her, or if she just succumbs to the mortal wounds that Mystique gave her, I could easily see that happening, because this timeline is not going to stay going forward. It will eventually be reset somehow, I believe, because everything is moving too far into the future for any of this to actually stick, which could potentially prove a theory I said about a week or two ago, that I think Storm is not going to survive this event, and this would be a way to do it, but yet still have Storm around once it's over. But anyway, those are my initial thoughts for Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants number 1. I like this so far. I like Storm being in a leadership capacity. You can tell that she has been hardened by the things that she's witnessing all of her friends die around her, witnessing her home of Araco being destroyed, witnessing the betrayal of the Quiet Council, and how everyone that she thought she could trust, and even some that she knew she couldn't trust, had ultimately betrayed her and tried to kill her. While she is still, for the most part, the same character, this is definitely a more tough character than what we are used to seeing of Storm. One who has been hardened by so many downfalls that, yeah, she would probably remind you of some of the future versions of Storm we have seen, both in the X-Men comics and even in like the X-Men animated series. That's everything I want to talk about with Storm and the Brotherhood number 1. If you enjoyed this video, do the YouTube thing, like, share, subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell so that way you don't miss out on any videos that I put out. The goal is to hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube in 2023, so click that red button and help this channel go beyond Omega level. In the meantime, let me know what you thought about Storm and the Brotherhood number 1. Keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.